Good afternoon, everybody. Good evening. Let's start the class for the day. I'm sure my voice is audible for you. Is my voice clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. If there is any issues, just let me know. Right. Today we are supposed to start with social forestry. I remember that's the last thing that we have dealt. So social forestry, first of all, it is, what did I tell you? Both for ecological purposes, it's a broad term. Social forestry is a very broad term and it includes ecological purposes, it includes economic purposes, right? So take down the first thing about social forestry, give the heading as social forestry. It is the management and development of forest. It is the management and development of forest. Just a second. This topic, social forestry. Just a second. It is the management and development of forest with afforestation, afforestation on barren lands, afforestation on barren lands to achieve both environmental benefit and rural development, to achieve both environmental benefit and rural development. So remember, it's always ecological plus economic purposes. It's a very broad term. These are the things that you should remember. It is a very broad terminology. The term was first coined by National Commission on Agriculture in the year 1976. The idea was to make use of, the idea was to make use of all unused and fallow land. Now here comes a term. What is fallow land? Fallow land, for your understanding, maybe in the brackets you can take down some running notes. Fallow land is just some, let's just say that I have a piece of land. Okay, I am cropping this field. I am cropping this particular field multiple times a year, multiple times, many times, once, twice, thrice. I'm cropping 3 times, let's say. After a point of time, maybe this will sustain for 1 year, maybe for 2 years, maybe for 10 years, but definitely after some 2-3 years, the fertility of this field will become very poor. The fertility of this field will become very poor, and therefore continuously, if I am using a field, I should, after some period of time, I should leave it. I should not cultivate it. I should not cultivate it. So if I'm cultivating for 2 years continuously, I should give a break of about 3 months at least without cultivation. Then I can cultivate for 2 years. then again a 3-month break, something like this. So the cultivation does not take place continuously. There is a breakage in between. Why? Because the field, the field needs some time to replenish itself. This is important. The field needs some time to replenish itself. The time period which we give for the field to replenish itself, the period during which we do not cultivate anything in the land so that the land can replenish itself, that duration is called fallowing period. That duration is called fallowing period. Every piece of land in this earth, the farmers usually undertake a fallowing period. This is for the land to replenish itself. All right. So yes, the basic idea is to uh, take the or make use of unused and fallow land. Plantation of trees were first of all done along railway lines and roadsides, rivers and canal banks, and in village common land. The government, the government also gave some incentives so that the planted field can be taken care of. Thus, social forestry program became as a mass mobilization scheme. Became as a mass mobilization scheme. It diversified non-farm based income to the farmers. It diversified the risk of farmers, right? Like this. It diversified the risk of farmers by giving them non-farm based income. It also became a part of wasteland development program to encourage forestry land usage on slopes, on mountain slopes. The government, with this scheme, right, like this, with this scheme, the government formally recognized recognized the community's rights to forest resources, and it is now encouraging rural participation in the management of natural resources. Okay, then give the heading as shortcomings or negative points or the negative shortcomings of the scheme. First one, number one, it was not very successful. First point, it was not very successful. This was continue in that same point. This was primarily because of the incentives given to farmers to encourage social forestry. Many farmers started to divert their agricultural land to forestry, and this compromised agricultural food crop growth, and this compromised agricultural food crop growth and food security. Number two, second shortcoming, the species which were grown, the tree species which were grown as a part of social forestry program were not native species, were not native species. Most of them were ecologically unsustainable. Example, example, eucalyptus. Do you know that eucalyptus is an invasive species? Eucalyptus, what is an invasive species basically? Invasive species എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ something which is not native of that area, something which has invaded that particular area. That's what we call it as an invasive species. Now, eucalyptus is an invasive species. It was not eucalyptus drains the groundwater. So eucalyptus was also planted as a part of social forestry program. So if you go to places like Kodaikanal, Ooty, you will find a lot of eucalyptus because they use it for commercial purposes like eucalyptus oil. They are marketed as medicinal products. So eucalyptus എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ആ ഒരു tree, it's quite invasive. Okay, what will it do? It will it will drain the groundwater of that particular area. You plant eucalyptus, it will eat, it will drink, consume a lot of groundwater. So that if you are cultivating eucalyptus, your groundwater potential will be very much disturbed or destroyed. Okay, so this you can take it as an example for the second point. All right, till this, is it clear? This example is clear? You have to write about eucalyptus being an invasive species. You also need to write about how it will disturb your groundwater potential. Yes, I can move forward. Take down types of social forestry. The next heading is types of social forestry. Um, any issues with this? Anything that you need to sort out? Is things clear here? Yes, okay. Okay, fine then, fine. Then we shall move forward. Okay. Okay. So the next one is types of social forestry. Remember, ഒരു chart പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ടായിരുന്നു last class. We wrote about there three different types of social forestry: rural forestry, urban forestry, farm forestry. We are just going to expand that. So the first side heading, give it as, this is the chart that I had drawn at last class. Social forestry can be divided into rural forestry, urban forestry, and finally farm forestry. And out of this, rural forestry can be further subdivided into two things. One is community forestry, and the other one is agroforestry. So we're just going to describe each one of them individually, starting from farm forestry. So take down types of social forestry. Number one, farm forestry. So take some running notes here. In farm forestry, what happens is, take some running notes, be very attentive. In this farm forestry, what happens is two things will happen. One is commercial exploitation of the forest resources, and sometimes even for non-commercial purposes, and sometimes even for non-commercial purposes, some trees will be planted uh, on their own farmland. All right. So on the farmland, some commercial purposes, they will plant the trees, they will sell the timber, they will sell everything. So that's basically commercial forestry. Non-commercial forestry, for the individual needs of that one individual farmer, for the individual needs of a particular family, for the individual needs of a particular family. It may be because of commercial motives. It may also not be for commercial motives. Okay, so that is the idea here. It may be for individual needs also, not exactly for commercial purposes. Okay, now coming to the next one, urban forestry. Basically, urban forestry, Marambo, it's growing uh, trees on urban areas, on urban centers. And write it down. Basically, trees in urban centers. So what is the purpose of growing trees in urban centers? Basically, the environment of urban cities is very, very polluted, right? It is very polluted. So for improving the urban environment, that is the purpose behind urban forestry. Commercial reasons or non, you cannot call it as non-commercial reasons also. Non-commercial reasons no parayumbo for individual usage. If I am cultivating something, here what is happening? Here it is purely ecological reasons to make the urban atmosphere look pleasant. Think of this: you are visiting Chennai, you are visiting Ernakulam. It's all completely filled with malls and some concrete buildings. You won't feel happy. Humans need some green spaces. Humans need uh, some social atmosphere, like a park where we can where there is some greenery. നമുക്ക് പോയി relax ചെയ്യാനായിട്ട് ഒരു public place is very much needed, which is filled with greenery. Humans need it, and therefore, to improve the environment, we are growing such kinds of urban forest. One type of this urban forest, one type, like what can I say? Urban forests are usually found as green belts. You can take this point in the rural urban fringe region. While teaching about rural urban fringe, I mentioned about green belts. Okay, so in that fringe region where it is neither completely village nor completely city, in that intermediate fringe region, I'll be having green belts. Okay, and then another thing that I mentioned in the last class was Miyawaki forest, right? Miyawaki forest. So basically, we need to write something about Miyawaki. This will be important for your um, prelims also. All right. So take down Miyawaki forest alone. We'll give you some notes. Urban forestry, what are the purposes? It can be trees in urban centers. It will improve the urban environment. Green belts in rough is an example of urban forestry. One of the recent method is Miyawaki method. So take down Miyawaki. It is a Japanese method of afforestation. It is a Japanese method of afforestation to grow urban forest, to grow urban forest by using native species, by using native species. It was started by this technique was started by Akira Miyawaki, a Japanese, Akira Miyawaki. This concept has revolutionized urban afforestation, urban afforestation by turning urban spaces into mini forest. Now, the most important thing here is native species only. So this part of native species, underline it.
Miss, urban spaces to what?
Mini forest. This approach is supposed to ensure that the the tree saplings becomes maintenance free. That is, it becomes self-sustainable after the first 3 years. It also ensures that plant growth is 10 times faster and the resulting plantation area is 30 times denser than usual. The seeds are planted at a very high density, and the ground is covered with a thick layer of mulch.
Miss, a sentence ഒന്നുകൂടി പറയാമോ?
The point is, I'm looking at so many sources. I'm having two books in front of me. Iniki bola sentence where I started. At least give me a hint where I started.
Miss, trees planted at a heavy density
Okay.
and
These the seeds are planted at a very high density, and the ground is covered with a thick layer of mulch. This is mulch. Get the spelling correctly. Mulch. Therefore, Miyawaki method helps to create a forest in just 20 to 30 years, while through conventional methods, it might take anywhere between 200 to 300 years. All right, that is Miyawaki method of urban forestry. So very recently, Miyawaki method has also been implemented in Kerala. So that was in news. Maybe if I see, I get it. Somewhere I read that. Maybe you can search for it yourself. Miyawaki method was also implemented in some portion of Kerala. Right. Let's go to the next topic: rural forestry. Rural forestry. This is quite important because നമ്മുടെ സിലബസിൽ മെൻഷൻ ചെയ്തിട്ടുള്ളത് social forestry and agroforestry ആണ്. So let's pay very clear attention to rural forestry. So rural forestry, as we know, we have seen in the previous thing also that it can be divided into two types: community forestry and agroforestry. First thing that we are taking up is community forestry. From the name, we can understand that there are some vacant community lands, vacant, unused community lands we are taking this community land, which is nobody is using it. We are taking this community land and planting saplings in those community lands. Therefore, the output of the timber or whatever we get from that, it is not for a single individual, it is for the entire community. This is the first point. First thing is we are using vacant, unused community land, the benefit of which is given to the entire community and not for any particular individual. All right, this is the first point. The second point is government also supports this. Government also supports this by giving some saplings, maybe some fertilizers, maybe some leveling equipments. If a tractor or JCB, that also will be given by the government. So community land, if you're going to develop it, and if you have the required permission, you will be aided by the government also. Now, what happens is the very first problem is these are the points with regard to community forestry. The problems with community forestry is, see, first of all, it is community land. First of all, it's community land. So what happens is maybe after 10 years or 20 years, when people do not pay much attention to it, one individual can come and collect the timber. Then some group of people will come, collect the timber, sell it in the public. So these things can happen. People take advantage of this community lands. What is it? People take advantage of this particular community land. So this happens everywhere, right? Suppose let's say that there is a mango tree in a vacant community land. Anybody and everybody will take the mangoes from that common tree, right? So just like that, if you have some forest in a community land, anybody and everybody will come and take the timber out of it, or maybe they will use it for some other purposes, maybe for housing purposes. They can construct a house out of timber. So for these things, they will use. Exploitation of the community reserves or the community forest resources is very, very maximum. Exploitation becomes very, very common practice. All right. Then comes agroforestry. Now, agroforestry is very important. From the name, we can understand something. Agroforestry means in one side I will have the normal, what can I say, for the purpose of agriculture, for the purpose of using that particular forest resources, I will be planting certain trees. I repeat, in an agricultural farm, for the purpose of commercial exploitation by a single individual, I will be cropping trees. I will be planting trees so that it gives me benefit. Like, have you heard of acres of teak plantation? Some people will say, I have 1 acre, 2 acres of teak plantation. Now, those are nothing but techniques of agroforestry. They are also involved in agriculture, but they do not cultivate small crops. They will be cultivating large trees. That's the only difference. All right. So agroforestry, it it integrates forestry in agricultural fields. It integrates forestry in agricultural fields. So what happens here is you get a lot of benefits. Like you can use the timber, you can use it for fuel, you can use it for construction, you can use it for many commercial activities. At the same time, there is also an indirect benefit. That is, what is the indirect benefit? It enhances ecosystem services. This word, please underline it. It enhances ecosystem services. What is ecosystem services? What does a forest do? First thing is it fixes carbon. Carbon sequestration happens through forest. So it fixes carbon. Second thing is it prevents soil erosion. Third thing is it will result in good groundwater table availability. The next thing is biodiversity conservation. That forest will have a certain biodiversity which is dependent on it, that will also be conserved. So these are what we call it as ecosystem services, indirect ecosystem services. The person who has cultivated or who has grown that agroforestry purely has commercial interest in his mind. But indirectly, there are some benefits which occur, which we call it as enhancing ecosystem services. And what are those services that we have listed out here? Carbon sequestration, preventing soil erosion, good groundwater table availability, which leads to water conservation, biodiversity conservation. These are the additional advantages. All right. Yes, that concludes my social forestry and agroforestry discussion. Now listen to this. Two things I would like to tell. But before that, any doubts in the things that we have discussed right now? Anything?
മാം അപ്പൊ ഇതില് എല്ലാ ടൈപ്പ് ഫോറസ്ട്രിക്കും ഇതേ ഇൻഡയറക്ട് ബെനിഫിറ്റ്സ് കിട്ടില്ലേ?
Yes, but
So
we are using it commercially also, no? These indirect benefits are something that forest always, any forest, or for that matter, any single tree also gives all this ecosystem services. Isha, this is given in your environment books also. Ecosystem services is provided by all trees, all forests. Isha, why do we call this specifically as agroforestry? Because it is grown by an individual who has purely commercial interest.
okay ma'am.
Yes. Now listen to this. Listen to this. We have covered this terminologies of social forestry and agroforestry. Two things to be noted here. One is land reforms and consolidation. While teaching in the class about green revolution, land reforms, land consolidation, I told you I will be giving you printed material. Okay, that I will give you before the completion of this particular chapter. The second thing is this part. Miyawaki forest and all will not be included in the notes. But apart from that, whatever we have discussed, whatever I have told orally, you will also be getting it in the form of printed, I mean, doc file, doc file. Clear? These two things. But again and again, I'm telling you, certain current affairs based things will not be available in the doc file. So other than those things I'm telling you orally. All right, this is clear to you. I'll go to the next topic. Give the heading as cropping. The heading cropping pattern or cropping pattern. Cropping pattern. Now, different crops are grown in different types or different times. Different crops are grown in different places during different times. At the end of the day, how will I choose a crop? How will I choose? Okay, I am in Tamil Nadu. I am in Kaveri Delta. This is how I choose. A normal example I'm taking. I am in Tamil Nadu. I am in Kaveri Delta. I have good soils which I am getting from the fresh alluvium which is brought down by the rivers, by the river Kaveri alluvium. Do not write this, just listen. Just listen. I have good water availability throughout the year, or more or less, I'm having a decent amount of water availability. I'm also having, since this being a plain area, I am also having good irrigation facilities. Good irrigation facilities is there. This is a plain area. I also have good labor because the places around Tanjavur, they have a lot of unskilled and semi-skilled population, especially female, who are in search of employment. Therefore, I'm having female labor. I'm having unskilled population. Therefore, my labor availability is good. I know this for sure. The next thing I know is states like Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, all of their food habits is basically rice. This thing I know. Therefore, if I'm cultivating rice here, I have alluvium soils, which is good enough for rice. I have good irrigation, good water, which is also very much needed for rice. The temperature is warm here, which is another character which is needed for rice. Rice cropping requires good amount of labor, which is also present here. I also have markets. I do have markets. Yes, I'm planting, I'm cropping rice, but at the end of the day, if nobody eats rice in my region, where will I go and sell it? So I need markets. I need my demand should be there for that particular commodity. So market is also there. Climate is also supporting it. So the factors which I take before choosing a crop from this pattern, from this idea, from this chart that we have made, we can say that these are the factors which we think before choosing a particular crop. What are the factors? Number one, climate. Number two, rainfall. Yes, these are all things that come under climate. Temperature. Number three, infrastructure like irrigation, seed availability, fertilizer, is the governmental policies supporting me? This is also they are supporting, like how they are giving what is called as, how is the government policy supporting us? To cultivate rice, they give what is called as MSP, minimum support price. So MSP is provided. So that is one government policy which is favorable for rice. Apart from that, I have markets. I have good quality labor. These are the conditions, yes or no? Broadly, these are the conditions which made me choose, for someone who is staying in Kaveri Delta region of Tamil Nadu, for someone like me to choose a crop. These are the factors which helped me. These are the factors which helped me. Essentially, if I have to choose a cropping pattern, roughly these are the factors which we will be keeping in mind to choose what crop are we going to plant in that particular area. Yes. In continuation of that, cropping pattern in India, can be roughly divided into 3 agricultural seasons. The major season being the Kharif cropping, Rabi cropping, and finally Zaid cropping. Just listen, or maybe you can take some running notes if you want. Kharif crops, basically, it is, okay, just a second, there is one small phone call, just a second. Yes, Kharif crops. Kharif crops, essentially, it requires some amount of heat. It is cultivated, or you can say it is harvested, or it is started to be sown. Sowing happens somewhere during the start of the summer months, or maybe in the mid summer, maybe I can say tell it as May June period. Sowing happens during the May June period. Harvesting happens in the late September to October. Late September to October months, that's when harvesting happens. Now, if you analyze this period, this period, something happens in India. That is, my southwesterly monsoons happen during during these times. What is the idea behind this? When sowing happens in May to June and harvesting happens during late September to October, the monsoon itself will provide water for the crops. That is the basic idea behind kharif crops. Basically, they are called as summer crops. Basically, they are called as summer crops or summer cropping. The types of crops which is usually grown as a kharif crop in India is the first and the major crop is rice. After that, some of the other important crops, maybe we can tell your bajra, maize, some of the pulses, cotton, jute, sugarcane. These are another important crops. Apart from rice, cotton, jute, sugarcane, these are some of the other important kharif crops. Coming to Rabi season. Rabi season is basically winter crop, which means it is grown during the winter season. The sowing happens during the winter season or at the start of the winter season. That would be better. At the start of the winter season, and it is harvested during the summer season. And the best example of Rabi crop is Rabi crops do not need much water. Rabi crops do not need much water. And the example of Rabi crops are wheat, peas, mustard, very, very important Rabi crop. Very, very important Rabi crop. Okay, probably these are some Rabi crops. Zaid, a short intermediary season between Kharif and Rabi is basically my Zayed cropping. It is a short season that happens during the intense summer months. It is a intervening. It is a intervening cropping season between Rabi and Kharif. The best crops which is grown here is all types of melons, watermelons, muskmelon, cucumber. These are grown in the Zayed season. So we have Kharif season, we have the Rabi cropping pattern season, and finally the Zayed season. All right. All right. Let's go to the next point. Let's go to the next concept. That is factors that affect my cropping pattern. Factors that affect my cropping pattern. Just listen to this. Maybe again, take some running notes. Take some running notes. Any doubts in this part? In this part of Kharif, Rabi, and Zaid? And any doubts in this part?
Miss, intense summer month.
Sorry, 1 second, something happened. What did you ask? Yes, tell me. What did you ask?
Is side crop ഇല്ലേ? അത് intense summer month അല്ലേ? അപ്പൊ അതെന്താ ആ ഒരു പീരിയഡിലെ പ്രത്യേകത?
No. Nothing important. അതിലെ ഒരു പ്രത്യേകത എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞിട്ടൊന്നുമില്ല. Before starting Kharif and after the end of Rabi. Like Rabi ends in the months of March somewhere. And from March to May, April, May, correct? April, May season. We do not have any, we will start Kharif only by May, June. So there is an intervening 2-3 months. For the 2-3 months, one crop we can cultivate, no? So they are the watermelon, cucumber and all, it's like short growing crops. Very, very short time period only they will take. So that is basically my Zayed season. ഒരു ആനുവൽ ഇയറിനെ കംപ്ലീറ്റ് ആയിട്ട് യൂസ് ചെയ്യാനായിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു സീസൺ ആണ് ക്രോപ്പിംഗ് സീസൺ. And the plants also, watermelon, cucumber, these plants do not take much time, so it's cultivated during that season. So that's why during the summer season we will have too many watermelons that will come to the markets. That's because of this season. Okay, anything else for anybody else? Right. Factors affecting cropping pattern. Whatever that we have discussed here, we are just going to describe it in a much more detailed format. First factor is, again, please take some running notes. First factor is geographical factors. Okay. In geographical factors, I have the first thing being my temperature, rainfall. Then I have something that's very, very important. Remember here I wrote one word, which is plain area, which means topography of a region also affects my crops. So the next thing is relief characteristics. And finally, I have soil conditions. These are the different geographical factors. Let us start with temperature. Some crops will require warm temperatures. Like for example, if I'm talking about my kharif crops, all my kharif crops will require warm temperatures. Rice requires a warm temperature. Cotton requires a warm temperature. So they need the heat. They are called as summer crops and they need the heat. Crops like wheat, which is grown in North India, they cannot sustain a lot of heat. And therefore, temperature is one of the important factors with regard to cropping. In fact, Kharif and Rabi crops are classified on the basis of rainfall and temperature. On the basis of their requirement of rainfall and temperature. On the basis of their requirement of rainfall and temperature. Coming to rainfall, something that is closely associated. There are areas which receive a heavy rainfall. Let's write it separately. There are some regions which receive heavy rainfall. Then there are some regions which receive moderate rainfall, and finally, very low rainfall. You can answer this. Now, in very low rainfall region, you cannot grow, I've been repeating this from the start, you cannot grow crops like rice or sugarcane. So heavy rainfall region, crops, we can grow crops like sugarcane, jute, rice. These are regions or these are crops which need good quality of rainfall. And then comes lower rainfall regions. This is the region where you can practice only dry land farming. And what crops did I tell will grow in dry land farms? What crops? What crops will grow in dry land farming?
Pulses.
No, always remember pulses. Yes, but mostly it will be
Cotton.
water.
Uh,
Millet. Millets is the most important crop, doesn't need any amount of water only. Millets and oil seeds. Yes. Huh. Millets and oil seeds. Millets and oil seeds like groundnut. Like, let me write it here. Okay. Groundnut, mustard, these can be cultivated almost anywhere. So these are the major crops which can be grown in dry land region. Apart from this, a bit of pulses can also be holding true. A bit, some pulses, but not all pulses. Okay. And now comes moderate region. Moderate region. Now, moderate region is where I can clearly say, I can clearly say moderate rainfall regions are regions which have rainfall in and around 100 centimeters, in and around 100 centimeters. And these regions I'll be mostly having when there is good rainfall. I'll be having crops like wheat, maize, etc., etc. And when there is lesser amount of rainfall, when there is a lesser amount of rainfall, I'll be having cotton and millets and so on. So basically, these and pulses. So pulses also will be growing here. So these are the regions, these are the crops which can be found in moderate rainfall region. So rainfall is also another important character. Coming, coming to relief. Now this is a very important deciding factor. Let's say that I have very slopy structure. What can I grow there? I can have tea and coffee, hill stations, tea and coffee. If it is a plain region, I can grow rice. If it is a kind of a deltaic region where there is constant flooding that is happening, I can grow jute. On the other hand, where the temperature is also much more cooler and the rainfall is medium, I can have wheat in a plain region. Wheat is also grown in a plain region. Rice is also grown in a plain region. So what is the character with rice? It requires good amount of rainfall. It requires good amount of temperature. Wheat requires moderate amount of temperatures and moderate temperatures, moderate cold, kind of cool temperatures, and it requires moderate amount of rainfall. Okay, so relief also plays an important role. Finally, coming to soils. Yes, of course, we all know that alluvium soils is good for rice. Similarly, black cotton soil, we call it as black cotton soil or the regar soil. It is fit for cotton cultivation. For rice, it's mostly the deltaic alluvium soils. And similarly, the deltaic soils are also famous for jute cultivation. If I'm talking about laterite soils, it is good for plantation crops. Yes, like this, soils also play a very important role. Maybe here you can write down certain examples also. That is with regard to geographical factors. The next factor that we are moving on to is about economic factor. Economic factor. Like what? Like, am I getting markets here? Am I getting the available infrastructure? Like what we have discussed here. What is the infrastructure? Infrastructure like irrigation, fertilizers, seeds. These are my infrastructural needs. Power is another need. Power. So that all comes under infrastructure aspects. These are broadly my economic factors. So first of all, if I'm talking about markets, as I've mentioned to you, if the demand is there, suppose let's say that the demand for um, millets, the demand for millets is going to be very, very high in the near future because everybody is becoming more and more aware of their health. Diabetes is becoming a very major issue. For diabetes, they are telling have millets, eat millets, it's good for your health. So people will start to buy more and more millet-based products, ragi, for example. So markets develop rainbow that automatically that will develop the demand for that particular crop. Coming to infrastructure, irrigation should be high. If irrigation is high, even in a moderate rainfall region, this is important. Understand this point. If irrigation is high, even in a moderate rainfall region, which is having a rainfall about 75 to 100 centimeters, even in this region, I can cultivate rice if irrigation is proper. And the efficiency will be low, but that's another parameter. Let's not worry about it. Even if I have very poor qualities of rainfall, if the irrigation is proper, if I have good source of canal irrigation, then what happens? I can grow good quality rice even in the northern parts of the country or in the northwestern parts of the country. All right. So reliable irrigation is one such important factor. Apart from that, power. Government should give power. Government should give subsidized electricity for the farmers to operate profitably. Government should give subsidized power. And for that, what scheme did we see? We saw about a scheme called Kusum scheme with regard to solar pump sets. Then comes seeds, fertilizers. These are other intensive inputs which the government should be giving. Intensive inputs like seeds, fertilizers, etc. All right. So that these are broadly my economic factors. Coming to political factors. Second one is economic. Third one is political factors. Coming to political factors, governmental policies should favor agriculture in that particular area. If there is a flood, if there is a natural calamity, the government should give me weather-based insurance, weather-based or disaster-based insurance, which is guaranteed by PM Fasal Bima Yojana, Fasal PMFBY. Another scheme or another thing regarding governmental policies is minimum support price. Rice and wheat gets a lot of MSP, very high MSP is received in rice and wheat. And that's also one reason, please note this down, and that's also one of the reason why all the farmers are always cultivating rice and wheat. Why? Because even if the market fails, government will purchase it because government is giving minimum support price. So that's another reason. Right? The next thing, final factor, historical factors. Historical factors. Historically, from the British times, certain areas have been allocated for certain crops. For example, if I'm talking about Darjeeling, if I'm talking about some of the doomed regions, mostly tea cultivation is done. Assam, tea cultivation is done. Down south in Karnataka, coffee cultivation is done. Who has designed all this? Historically, the British themselves have designed such a cultivation pattern. Sugarcane sugarcane is grown very, very much in the northern India. But if you're comparing the sugarcane, if you're taking one sugarcane from North India, I'm sure you must all know about sugarcane, no? The normal sugarcane that you eat. If you're taking one sugarcane from North India and if you're taking one sugarcane from South India, the South Indian sugarcane is actually more sweeter. South Indian sugarcane is actually more sweeter. So these are some of the actually why what happens with regard to sugarcane. We will be writing detailed notes about it. But sugarcane cultivation in the north also has been encouraged by the British. By the British. When indigo cultivation, when indigo was removed from India, there was a lot of agitation. Yes, indigo based agitation was there in India. Indigo na pagaram avaru introduced cheyda oru crop aanu sugarcane. They thought from the down south, let's take sugarcane and let's start cultivating sugarcane in North India as an alternative to indigo, so that these farmers at least have something to harvest, so that these farmers have some jobs to rely upon. So historically, even sugarcane practice in North India has been encouraged by the British. So historical factors, colonial factors also are very, very important. Any doubts in these four factors that we discussed? Any doubts? Is things clear? Can I go to the next topic? Have you guys taken some running notes? Yes. Yes, you are taking running notes, right? But don't worry, we will be giving you notes also. Notes also. Printed doc file I will send you. But the point is, please take some running notes. Because number whatever running notes if I give, only some handwritten notes where you understood the meaning, and if you are writing something on your own hands, that is having its own benefits. Even today, I have my own notes. So yes, continue. Major, now this is another topic, cropping pattern another subtopic, major food crops of India. Now this is why I have been suggesting that this discussion will be important even for your prelims, because uh, when I'm discussing about crops like rice, sugarcane, coffee, tea, it will be helpful for your prelims also. Right. So we'll start with the major crop, that is rice. Right. Rice is a tropical crop. Of course, we know about it. Wheat is a temperate crop. It's mostly grown in the temperate region of India. Rice is grown in the tropical region of India. So rice is a tropical crop. It requires high temperature, like about 22 to 30 degrees Celsius, somewhere around 25 to 30. That would be the correct range. Let me write this. The first point is number 1A. It is a tropical crop. B, it requires a temperature range of about 25 to 30 degree Celsius. It requires warm temperatures, or you can say even high temperatures, and it also requires good quality of rainfall. So it requires high rainfall greater than 100 centimeters. Roughly about 100 to 150 is what we need. Greater than 100 centimeters or 100 to 150 centimeters of rainfall. So high temperature is also needed, high rainfall is also needed. But as I have mentioned to you before, in areas where even if you are having 75 to 100 centimeters of rainfall, you can grow rice. You can grow rice. That's how many of the parts of Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh, they are actually indulged in this form of rice cultivation, even if the rainfall is lower, because of irrigation canals. All right. The next point is most of the rice producing regions will be in and around Kaveri Delta plains of Tamil Nadu, Krishna Godavari Deltaic region, West Bengal region, the Gangetic Delta region of West Bengal region. Apart from this, these are the prominent regions. So AP and Tamil Nadu are in fact the major producers of rice. But apart from this, by using irrigation, specifically canal irrigation, rice is also grown in Haryana, Punjab, and parts of Western Uttar Pradesh. All right, these are my regions with regard to rice. Just a second. Now, with regard to rice, one specific thing that you need to know is the soil that you require. Which is the soil we require? Clayey, loamy soils, which is brought down by the river alluvium probably. So basically alluvial soils that you get it in river delta, coastal plains, etc. So basically the river alluvium or the alluvial soils of India, which you get it in the plain region or you get it in the coastal plain region, that's the most important soil requirement. So first what we saw is with regard to climate requirement. Now we are seeing about soil requirement. And another thing is, it is a very labor intensive crop. It is a highly labor intensive crop. Yes, for why do we say that? Adyan Makafli field in a plow chayanam. Then we have to sow the fields. At the same time, we need that sowing process is one side, and then we need to transplant it into the main field. Transplantation needs a good quality labor. Have you seen the women transplanting the small saplings into the main field? It requires skills. You and me cannot go, first of all, you and me cannot stand properly in the field. The field will be very marshy. We cannot move easily with our feet. Have you ever stood in between a field? Have you ever walked in a field which is marshy? Not in a normal field, but in a marshy field. Have you tried to walk in a marshy field? Done that ever? It's pretty difficult. Those who have done that, yes, right. So those who have done that knows the difficulty. Your field, your to take your leg, one leg, and it's not like walking on a ground. It's pretty difficult. So never underestimate a farmer. It requires a lot of skill. The planting the crops requires the field. Sowing the crops, everything requires a lot of field. Even plowing, getting the cow into the field and plowing the field requires a lot of skill. So it's a very labor intensive industry. It's a labor intensive crop. Therefore, areas where you get cheap labors, good population, highly populated areas where you get good source of labor is an important factor. All right. So some of the uh, climatic factors we have seen, some of the soil factors, and then labor based factors, and we also saw about the spread the geographical spread of that particular crop. Now, methods of rice cultivation. Methods of rice cultivation. The first method is broadcasting method. Broadcasting method. So what happens is, just a second. Right. So what happens is, there is no usually when you see the women transplanting the seeds, I mean transplanting the saplings, or if this is, suppose, let's say this is a field. I told you that you will be having a nursery in one corner of the field where kuti saplings will be there. You plug the women folk will come, they will take this sapling and they will plant it in the main field. What is observed is there will be a fixed row and column arrangement. Usually there will be a fixed row and column arrangement. On the other hand, when the seeds are merely thrown into the what do you call, into the field, that's called as broadcasting method. But this, you have to understand this, it is done on a very small field. Direct sowing on, but it's you cannot even call it as direct sowing. It's like mere throwing of the seeds. Mere throwing of the seeds into the field after plowing it. The one first basic thing is some of the disadvantages, or maybe write it in points. First of all, it's a small field. It can be done only in a small field. You cannot use this for commercial cultivation. This can be done only for individual or a family-based usage. Individual or for a small family-based usage. This cannot be experienced or exploited or commercial cultivation is possible. The labor requirement is very less labor, and minimum inputs is needed for it, and therefore the yield is also minimum. Okay, that is about broadcasting method. The second method is drilling method. Drilling method. Here, it's a two persons will be involved. Two persons will be directly involved with the farming process. Let me repeat, only two persons will be involved in this farming process. One person will plow the field, and the other person at the when he is plowing, after the plowing gets over, he will be sowing the seed. So one person, let's say that this is a big field. One person has plowed this region and he is right now plowing the next part of it. He's plowing here. He has completed plowing this particular region. Now what will the other person do is, as soon as he finishes, the first person finishes plowing this area, he will start sowing the seeds. So plowing and sowing will take place simultaneously. At the same time, let me rephrase it. Let me rephrase it in another way, or in simple words, we can say one person will scooping out the soil while the other person will plant the seeds. One person will be scooping out the soil, scooping out. It's like ice cream scoop. He will be scooping out the soil so that mixing happens. He will be scooping out the soil, whereas the other person will be sowing the seeds. Both drilling method and broadcasting method, follow me very closely, both drilling method and broadcasting method are primitive subsistence methods of cultivation, are primitive subsistence methods of cultivation, cannot be exploited commercially, and the yields are very, very low. Mostly, drilling method is practiced in the dry regions of peninsular plateau. For example, if I'm talking about Chhattisgarh, if I'm talking about some portions of Jharkhand, maybe some portions of drier regions of Telangana. These are the regions where drilling methodology will be practiced. Dry regions, follow me, dry regions, dry interiors. The yields will be very, very poor. It is a very subsistence methodology. You cannot take this as a commercial method. Both broadcasting and drilling cannot be taken as a commercial method of rice cultivation. Now, what is the commercial method then? Transplantation method is the commercial method. What happens in a transplantation? Let me quickly go through Google and maybe I can get a couple of pictures for you. Wait a second. If there is any doubts in the last two methodologies, you may ask me now. My computer is very slow. Okay, never mind. Let me explain what is transplantation method. It is an advanced commercial method of rice cultivation. It is a highly labor intensive method. Commercial method ആണ്. Labor intensive method ആണ്. This is labor intensive. It is done only in areas which has, since it's commercial method, therefore you can understand this point also. It is done in areas which receive or which has good soils and which receives good rainfall, abundant rainfall. In this method, what happens is, first of all, I explained this in the class also, if you could remember. If I have a big field, one corner I will be cultivating or I will be having what is called as the nursery bed. Here I will be having the small rice saplings. After they attain a certain level of height, the women folk will come, they will transplant it into the main field. This is called as transplantation method. This is called as transplantation method. Your normal rice cultivation method ആണ്. First of all, I'll be planting the saplings in the nursery, and then when it has reached a sufficient height, I will shift it to my main field. This is called as transplantation method. What you generally see in villages is mostly transplantation method, because transplantation method give me the highest yields, because I am giving good or high intensive inputs. What do you mean by high intensive inputs? I'm giving stuff like fertilizers, chemical pesticides, manuring, good manures. Everything will encourage my crops to grow intensively. Transplantation. Yes, have you got this point with regard to transplantation method, broadcasting method, and drilling method? Let's see if I can get a pic or something. 1 second. The next method that we have is, just listen to this. The next method, which is also a very commercial method, is the system of Japanese method. We call it as the Japanese method. So apart from uh, transplantation method, another method is Japanese method. Let me share my screen with you. Can you see this methodology, the normal methodology, where first of all you would be having, computer is very slow. So basically, yes, this is something it. This is it. I'll be having small patches like this picture that you see here. I'll be having small patches of crops like this. I will take this and then I will be planting it in my bigger fields. This is what we call it as transplantation method. Transplantation method essentially involves, can you see the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
So this is basically your general methodology, Anna, but what happens is a nursery happens, a small nursery, This is what we call it as a nursery. So this small thing is what we call it as a nursery. From Ibada they take it to the main field. So that is basically my transplantation method. Now coming to the next one, it is about fourth one, called as Japanese method. This is also a highly commercialized method. First point, highly commercialized, extensive inputs, extensive inputs. It is mostly followed in advanced economies, like for example Japan. It is mostly followed in advanced economies because manual labor is is more or less highly minimalistic. Manual labor is very minimalistic, and mechanization is maximum. Mechanization is maximum. That is the Japanese method. Very similar to my transplantation method, but everything is done by machines and not by man. Okay. That is Japanese method, mostly followed in developed countries. High intensive agriculture ana. But what is important is very, very, very high yields is obtained here. Very, very high yields is obtained in these kinds of Japanese methodology. And then comes number 5. What I am discussing from now onwards, it is important for prelims also. These are some things which will be not in there in your printed notes, so follow this carefully. Direct seeding methodology, and then alternate wetting and drying, alternate wetting and drying. Apart from that, you also have, yes, system of rice intensification. These three alone, let's take notes. These three alone, let's take notes. Let us start from system of rice intensification. Take down the heading as system of rice intensification. System of rice intensification. All right. Now take just a quick explanation. Just listen to this first of all. നമ്മുടെ transplantation method എന്തൊക്കെയാണ് പഠിച്ചത്? നമുക്ക് ഒരു nursery bed ഉണ്ട്. Small saplings are grown here. After that, it will be transplanted to the main field. Now, what will happen in SRA is same thing, but a small modification is done. The seedlings are not planted in a nursery which is present in the field. The seed saplings are planted elsewhere, maybe in their homes, maybe in a small patch, where I will not be planting the seedlings directly in water. I will not be planting the seedlings directly in water. I will be planting the seedlings in a mixture of cow urine plus jaggery plus water, so that these two things will act as natural pesticides. And then there is something called as two-leaf stage. Two-leaf stage of rice sapling. Two-leaf stage of rice sapling. Two-leaf stage is nothing but bear my drawing skills. But when your sapling has two leaf, very small, tiny two leaves, that is what we call it as the two-leaf stage of rice sapling. All right. Then this two leaves will be developed after somewhere 12 to 15 days. 12 to 15 days. നമുക്ക് ആദ്യം seed ആണ് കിട്ടുന്നത്. നമ്മൾ എവിടെയാണോ ആ seed plant ചെയ്യുന്നത്? We are constructing a small nursery. The nursery is not filled with water. മറിച്ച് we'll be having cow urine, jaggery along with water. We are planting that seed there. After 12 to 15 days, we'll be getting two leaf in that particular seed. That is called as the two-leaf stage of the rice. And thereafter, they will be transplanted into the main field. This is about system of rice intensification. What happens here? The first thing is productivity will be increased. The second thing is there will be a natural pesticide which will be developing even in the seed stage. Even in the seed stage, there will be a natural pesticidal action which will be developed all over the plant body. So that's another advantage. Take down system of rice intensification. System of rice intensification, just a second. This system was developed in Madagascar. This system or this method was developed in Madagascar. Get the spelling correctly. Was developed in Madagascar, and it is gaining popularity in different parts of the world as it offers certain advantages. In this method, before sowing seeds directly in the nursery, like what is done in the transplantation method, here seeds are first soaked. Seeds are first soaked, SOAKED, soaked in a mixture of jaggery, cow urine, and water for 10 to 12 hours. Full stop. The seeds are then planted in a small nursery. And grown for a period of 12 to 15 days till it reaches the two-leaf stage, underlying two-leaf stage. Thereafter, the saplings are planted onto the main field. Wide spacing is maintained between the plants so that each of these get maximum air and sunlight. It gives very good yield, but no, don't write that. Write it like this. Canovida, this spelling is this, cano, C-A-N-O-E, canovida. Canovida is used for weeding purposes, so that it aerates the soil, and at the same time, this is important, it aerates the soil and at the same time mixes the uprooted seeds with the soil, that leads to increased soil fertility. What happens here is the weeds are inserted back into the soil so that the soil fertility is replenished. In the transplantation or Japanese method, many seedlings are planted at one place. That is, it requires about 20 kgs of seeds per hectare. SRI, on the other hand, requires only 2 kgs of seeds per hectare.
Sentence
Transplantation or Japanese method uses many seedlings at one single place. That is, it requires roughly about 20 kgs of seeds per hectare. 20 kgs of seeds per hectare. SRI, on the other hand, requires only about 2 kgs of seeds per hectare. Also, next point, also, a plant in SRI develops much more panicles. This is important. Much more panicles. PANICLES. Develops much more panicles per plant than other methods. Now, what is panicles? Panicles means it is the part in which the grain is present. Panicles is the part in which grain is present. Suppose, let's say, for one crop, we are getting some 30 to 50 panicles using the other methods. This method we'll be getting more than 70 panicles. So that means per crop there are more grains. Okay, so that is the idea behind panicles. And then continue. It also saves water and at the same time reduces emission of methane gas. Underline this. This is very, very important. It reduces the emission of methane gas. The only disadvantage is labor availability. That's a disadvantage with many schemes. Even for transplantation method, labor availability so labor availability is a very important component. So labor requirement is also very high with regard to SRI methodology also as well. All right. So that concludes SRI system. Now take down the next one, which is let's write about alternate wetting and drying. Alternate wetting and drying. Now, if you have any doubts with SRI, now it is the time to ask. Any doubts with SRI that you have?
Ma'am, Cano Weeder point on explain.
Cano Weeder. Okay, I forgot to mention this. Cano Weeder is nothing but it is a mechanized weeder. Or mechanized weeder. Usually, what weeder does is weeder that some weeder machine. It just weeds. It does not do anything else other than that. A person will sit on top of it. He knows. I mean, he will be using that weeder. He knows where is the weeds are present, and he will operate that particular machine. Cano weeder is another mission which can actually mulching technology. I've taught mulching technology. Cano does this mulching. It will trap the weed. At the same time, it will push the weed into the soil. It will trap the weed. It will push the weed into the soil. So because the spacing between one crop and the other crop is very wide, Cano weeder can be very successfully operated in SRI. It's not like it cannot be operated elsewhere, but it can be operated very successfully in SRI technique.
Okay, ma'am.
Remember that point where I mentioned that the spacing between one and the other crop is pretty high in SRA. So that's the reason wide spacing is maintained between the plants. I mentioned that point. So that's the reason. Did I mention that point? Wide spacing is maintained.
Yes, ma'am.
So that, have we written this? So that each of these get maximum air and sunlight. Did we write like this?
Yes, ma'am.
That point. That is the reason why canno weeder can be operated in SRI, and canno weeder എന്താ ചെയ്യുന്നത്, weed ചെയ്യുന്നത് മാത്രമല്ല, it will put the plant back into, it will push the plant back into the soil so that the soil nutrients get replenished. Right? Anything else? Right. Let's write about the next one, which is alternate wetting and drying. Just a second. This system, alternate wetting and drying, this system, and again, let me remind you, alternate wetting and drying is also important for your prelims, because agriculture is a very important topic in your prelims. So that's why this topic is important. Take down first point. This method is practiced in the areas where farmers have access to irrigation and water, which can be provided at will, which means at any point of time, if they need water, there will be water. So it's like which can be provided at will. Now what happens is when there is too much water availability, rainfall anengilum, irrigation methodology, if there is too much water availability, naturally the farmers will have a tendency to overuse water. Naturally, do not write all this, I'm just explaining. Naturally, there will be a tendency for the farmers to overuse the water. And when water is overused, first thing, it's an exploitation of a natural resource. It will deplete my groundwater availability. The third important, the most important thing is, follow me very, very, very carefully. When you are flooding the water, when you're flooding the field with water, it will lead to methane emissions. Wherever you are finding a flooded field, methane will be started to emit from that particular field. All right. So if you can observe this, if you have a flooded field which is flooded for 2 days or 2 days or 3 days continuously, one bad smell will start coming from that field. Other chalapo, it will be like pungent odor kind of thing will start coming from that field, and that's nothing but methane. Now methane emissions will start coming, which is environmentally unsustainable. That's why when there is too much water which is available, we should be engaging in a practice which is called as alternate wetting and drying. We should not let the farmers to use the water unjudiciously, or you can say you should not let them exploit a very precious natural resource. Take down, continue writing. In this method, intermittent form of irrigation, take the spelling, let me take fresh page, intermittent intermittent form of irrigation is used and water is provided to the field only when it goes below a certain level. When a field is flooded excessively, anaerobic respiration of organisms, respiration of microorganisms will begin, and it will lead to methane emissions. In fact, continue. In fact, methane emissions from agricultural fields is one of the most potent source of greenhouse gas emissions that take place naturally. Also, excessive groundwater usage will lead to salinization problems, and groundwater depletion. Will lead to salinization problems and groundwater depletion. Thus, agricultural scientists have recently recommended intermittent or alternate wetting and drying technique. All right. All right, that is my alternate wetting and drying technology. Clear? Clear this one, this topic is clear to you? Alternate or AWD technology? Yes, okay. Let's move to the next topic. It is about direct seeding. Direct seeding. Take down. Wait a second. Due to acute labor shortage, write like an introduction. Due to acute labor shortage in the states of, in many states, farmers are now being encouraged to adopt direct seeding of rice in place of conventional transplantation methodology. In transplantation method, farmers prepare nurseries initially and the saplings are then replanted into the main field. In transplantation method, farmers prepare nurseries and the saplings are then transplanted into the main field. In DSR, in direct seeding of rice. In DSR, the pre-germinated seeds, the pre-germinated seeds. Pre-germinated seeds, that seed will have just a small white color growth. That's germination. Pre-germinated seeds are directly drilled into the field using a tractor powered machine. There is no nursery preparation or transplantation using laborers is involved in this method. Next point. In DSR method, in this method, as flooding is not done, chemical herbicides are used to kill the growth of weeds. First of all, another subheading, advantages of DSR. Number 1, water savings. Number 2, less number of laborers. Number 3, reduced emissions due to shorter flooding period. Drawbacks of DSR. Sometimes farmers will not be able to purchase the required chemical weedicides. Number 2, seed requirement for DSR is high when compared to transplantation method. Number 3, sowing of the seeds need to be done in a timely manner so that plants come out properly before the arrival of the monsoon rains. So if the intelligence is more required, they should have a proper planning. So these are the drawbacks and these are the advantages. The basic advantages is less requirement of water as well as less emissions. All right. So this is the direct seeding technology. So with that, more or less, we have completed rice. We will be moving on to wheat in the next class. All right, we'll be moving on to wheat in the next class. Yes, thank you so much. We shall end the class now.
Miss, ഒരു മിനിറ്റ് മെന്ററിംഗ് സെഷൻ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. അപ്പം ജുബിൻ സാർ പറഞ്ഞത് ഒരു 1-ാം തീയതിക്കുള്ളിൽ തന്നെ ക്ലാസ്സസ് എല്ലാം ക്ലോസ് ചെയ്യുന്നു. അപ്പം ജോഗ്രഫിയുടെ എങ്ങനെയാ?
Hello?
മിസ് കേൾക്കാവോ?
Yes.
ഇന്ന് മെന്ററിംഗ് സെക്ഷൻ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. അപ്പം ജുബിൻ സാർ പറഞ്ഞത് 1-ാം തീയതിക്കുള്ളിൽ തന്നെ ക്ലാസ്സസ് എല്ലാം ക്ലോസ് ചെയ്യുന്ന പറഞ്ഞു, എല്ലാം തീർക്കുമെന്നാ പറഞ്ഞു. അപ്പം ഈ ജോഗ്രഫിയുടെ ഇതിൽ നമുക്ക് എത്ര ക്ലാസ് വരും? അപ്പൊ ആ ഒരു സമയത്തിനുള്ളിൽ തീരുമോ?
Once principal sir came to the class, were you there or not there? എനിക്കറിയത്തില്ല. പക്ഷെ ഒരു പ്രാവശ്യം principal sir came to the class and announced that it will continue till the March end.
Okay.
എല്ലാവരും ഓർമ്മ ഉണ്ടോ? This thing that principal sir and Jubin sir came to class and they talked about, how many of you remember about this? That's why they came to class and mentioned this, both of them.
Okay.
ആർക്കെങ്കിലും ഓർമ്മ ഉണ്ടോ ഇവിടെ? Nobody remembers that.
ഇല്ല സർ, എല്ലാം ഓർക്കുന്നില്ല.
Those two people came to class and announced in between. Nobody remembers this, and nobody remembers this. Principal sir came to class one day. Remember that? No.
Yes.
Yes, they came. At least one person remembers. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, so they came to class and they said, and maybe you can ask to Jubin sir also, we will complete this by March end. I guess I have 4 more chapters. Apart from agriculture, we will take 1 more class. 4 or 5. I have 5 more chapters. Ajo sir has got 4 chapters. So yes, it will take till March end. Clear? Any more doubts?
No, ma'am.
For anybody else? Anybody else has got any more doubts? Fine, then we'll wind up the class. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, miss.